And welcome back to AP Psychology. I'm Miss Lee, and we are still in Unit 5, Cognition. This video is going to be covering forgetting and memory distortion. Our learning target is to describe strategies for memory improvement and typical memory errors. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and grab your notes and let's get started. So let's first start out by talking about what forgetting actually is. For our purposes, it is the inability to retrieve information due to poor encoding, storage, or retrieval. There are lots of reasons for forgetting information. You need to be able to understand all of them as well as how each are a memory failure. There are three types of forgetting. First, there is an encoding failure. We can't remember what we didn't encode. If we aren't paying attention or entering the information into our long-term memory in the first place, we aren't going to be able to retrieve it later because it just simply doesn't exist. Memory isn't magic. We forget because of storage decay. This is poor durability of stored memories leading to their decay. Yet it's not quite deletion. And then we have a retrieval failure. Although the information is retained in the memory store, it just can't quite be accessed. So you may want to look back on your encoding notes, specifically the memory effects slide. How are each of these encoding failures? Next in line effect, spacing effect, serial position effect. One of our key players in memory and forgetting is a researcher named Ebbinghaus, and he showed storage decay with his forgetting curve. This is something you will definitely want to be familiar with. You see that the initial drop in retention of information, but it does even out over time. We believe that this is due to the gradual fading of the memory trace in the brain. The connections aren't as strong and efficient as they once were. Take a look at this graph and you can see what I'm talking about. Every time the information is reviewed, less is decayed, and that's a good thing. So what does this tell you about what's going to happen with what you're learning right now, according to Ebbinghaus? And what can you do to prevent some of the negative effects? Similar research was done by Barik in 1984, but for very long-term memory. And the research did show similar effects as Ebbinghaus's findings. The research was just looking at years, not days. The biggest loss of information is in the immediate years right after the learning of it. Then the retention is pretty steady for the rest of our lives. We talked about tip of the tongue phenomenon, and this is a retrieval failure, but the main retrieval failure you'll need to know about is interference. This is when information blocks the retrieval of other information. So let's look at some examples of passing interference. As you're watching the video, see if you can relate it to what we're talking about.
Pass interference is any act by a player more than 1 yard beyond the line of scrimmage that significantly hinders an eligible player's opportunity to catch the ball. Pass interference can only occur when a forward pass is thrown from behind the line of scrimmage, regardless of whether the pass is legal or illegal, or whether it crosses the line. Defensive pass interference rules apply from the time the ball is thrown until the ball is touched. The following actions will result in a foul for defensive pass interference. Contact by a player who is not playing the ball that restricts the opponent's opportunity to make the catch. Playing through the back of an opponent in an attempt to make a play on the ball. Grabbing an opponent's arm in a way that restricts his opportunity to catch a pass. Extending an arm across the body of an opponent, restricting his ability to catch the pass. This is commonly referred to as an arm bar. Cutting off the path of an opponent by making contact with him without playing the ball. And hooking and turning an opponent in an attempt to get to the football before it arrives.
Two of the most confused vocabulary terms in the entire course are proactive interference and retroactive interference. So let's talk about each. Proactive interference. This is when old information blocks the retrieval of new information. So let's say, for example, your cell phone was stolen, you had to get a new phone and a new number, but whenever someone asks you for your number, you still give out your old one. Retroactive interference is when new information blocks the retrieval of older information. So basically, let's say you are in calculus class, but you can't remember how to solve a geometry question when your younger sibling asks for help. Studies show that sleeping immediately after learning or studying information aids the retention of that information. So basically, seriously, if you study right before you go to bed, it helps avoid retroactive interference. Try it. See what happens. Let's talk about motivated forgetting. People unknowingly revise their memories. We don't remember items we don't want to remember. Psychoanalytic theory calls this repression. This is a defense mechanism that banishes anxiety-arousing thoughts, feelings, and memories from consciousness. This is one of Freud's key factors in explaining his theories. You're welcome. So let's talk about why we forget. Forgetting can occur at any memory stage. We filter, alter, and lose much information during all of these stages. Let's start out with sensory memory. This is where the senses momentarily register amazing amounts of detail. We're talking thousands of pieces of information in a split second. But only a few items are noticed and encoded. This is your short-term or working memory. This is that 7, give or take 2 number of items retained. Some items are altered or decayed in the transfer from short-term working memory to long-term storage. And then you've got the problem of interference, cues, moods, and motives, possibly inhibiting retrieval from the long-term memory. But not all memory loss is due to factors of forgetting. Some memory loss can be due to structural damage to the brain. And that structural damage to the brain is called amnesia. This is partial or complete loss of memory due to physical or psychological damage. Physical damage to some parts of the brain, whether it's Alzheimer's disease, stroke, or brain trauma. And then psychological damage could be triggered by a traumatic event. Most memories do return over time, usually within a few days. You have 2 types of amnesia. Again, these are those confusing terms that people have trouble remembering which is which. First, you have anterograde. It's an inability to remember ongoing events after the incidence of trauma. This is the inability to remember ongoing events after the incidence of trauma or the onset of the disease that caused the amnesia. And then you have retrograde. This is the inability to remember events that occurred before the incidence of trauma or the onset of the disease that caused the amnesia. The key to remembering these is asking yourself, where is the memory loss? Is the loss for the memories before the traumatic event or after? Therein lies your answer. A couple of more pieces of information that you will need to know. There's other types of amnesia. Source amnesia is not a typical case of amnesia of severe memory loss due to damage. So basically, thank you to whoever called it this, because that is causing interference for me. Source amnesia is attributing an event or piece of information to the wrong source we've experienced, heard, read, or imagined. So it's basically misattribution. And just like true perception and illusion, real memories or memories that seem real are difficult to discern. So just because a memory feels real doesn't mean it is real. Our brain can tell the difference between real and false memories, but we cannot if something was never heard. There would be no sensory record to be activated in the temporal lobe. So if the brain was analyzed when you told about how you heard the false fact, the temporal lobe would not be activated. The brain doesn't lie. Another key person in this section is Elizabeth Loftus, and she has conducted a ton of research in the arena of constructed memories. A lot of the research was involving these constructed memories. One research study that she conducted involved contacting the parents of college students, and when she did that, she got lists of childhood events that the students were asked to recall. In those lists, she added plausible events that never actually happened, like being lost in a shopping mall, spilling a punch bowl at a wedding, or meeting Bugs Bunny at Disney World, which is not possible because Bugs Bunny is not a Disney character. After repeated recall attempts over a period of several days, many of the students claimed to remember the bogus events. All that was required were some credible suggestions. So your takeaway from constructed memories is that oftentimes eyewitness testimony is full of errors, but it is still one of the main methods used to gain information about crimes. Some important things to remember: people's recollections are less influenced by leading questions if forewarned that questions could create memory bias. Passage of time allows original memories to fade, so you need to ask right away for more accurate information. And the age of the witness matters. Younger children and adults over 65 may be especially susceptible to the influence of misinformation. So based on what we've talked about in this unit so far, what are some ways that you could work to improve your memory at any of these three stages? First, you could study repeatedly to boost long-term recall. You can spend more time rehearsing or actively thinking about the material. You can make the material personally meaningful. You can use mnemonic devices. We've got associations with peg words, and that's something that's already stored. You can make up a story about the information, or you can chunk the information. You can also use acronyms. Activating retrieval cues, which is mentally recreating situation and mood. Recalling events while they're still fresh before you encounter misinformation. So you learn some information, you study the information. And then you want to minimize interference. Test your own knowledge. This is one of those things that we do, but we don't always know why we're doing it. And then rehearse and determine what you don't know yet. And that is it for forgetting. In our next video, we're going to be talking about thinking and problem solving. I can't wait to see you then. Bye for now.